This is Eric Mounts, and this August 5th, 2020 meeting of the Board of Adjustment will now come to order. Due to COVID-19 concerns, this meeting will be held virtually. Information on how to participate in the virtual meeting has been posted on the Board of Adjustment webpage at www.boco.org/BOA. There will be an opportunity to remotely provide public comment on the subject dockets during the respective public hearing portions for each item. I'll provide instructions about that when we get to each docket on the agenda. I'll now take a roll call of the Board of Adjustment members. James Greer. James, can you hear me? Can you respond if you're there?
Present.
Scott Rudge.
Scott Rudge, present.
Carrie Stolfus.
Present.
Sarah Webenson.
Present.
Thank you. Just a reminder, please identify yourself before speaking and speak slowly and clearly so that we can create a good record of this proceeding. All votes on dockets will be roll call votes. It may help you to keep your participant list open in Teams so that you can see who is speaking. The person who's speaking is going to be bolded on the list to the right of on the right side of your screen. At this time, I'll take the opportunity to explain the public hearing process. We have one docket item scheduled for today's Board of Adjustment meeting, and there'll be an opportunity to provide remote public comment on the subject docket during the public hearing portion for this item. The order of presentation will be first to hear from the staff, next to hear from the applicant, and then to hear from members of the public who wish to provide comment. When providing comment, please direct all of your questions and comments to the board. The chair, which is me, will decide which question, will direct any questions that arise during the hearing to the appropriate party. Once we've heard all the relevant testimony and questions have been answered, the public hearing will be closed. The board will then discuss the merits of the case and come to a decision. Any members of the public will have a chance to speak, even if you didn't sign up on the Board of Adjustment webpage beforehand. We'll allow those who signed up in advance to speak first, and then I'll call for any additional members of the public who will be attending this meeting virtually to speak. If you join by computer, please sign up by submitting your first name, last name, address, and docket number in the chat box on the right side of the screen. If you dialed into this meeting via phone, unmute yourself with *6 and then state your desire to provide public comment. We'll then add your name to the list in the chat box and proceed in that order. When I call on you to speak, unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone button on the bottom of the Teams bar, or if on the phone, click *6 and start by stating the name and address, stating your name and address for the record. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. You'll hear an alarm once your time's up. Please do not submit comments or questions in the chat box during the meeting. The chat box should be used only for public hearing speaker signups. Please remain on mute when possible. The moderators will mute you if we see that your connection is a source of background noise that's interfering with the meeting. Members of the public will be unable to share their screens during public comment. Applicants, please have your presentations, if any, pulled up and ready to go, and I'll announce when we're ready for you to present. And at that time, you'll be able to share your screen. I'm now calling the docket number VAR-20-003, the harm setback variance. We'll hear from the staff, and the staff may proceed with their presentation.
All right, good afternoon, board. My name is Sean Gambrell. I am the planner assigned to this docket. I should be sharing my screen. Please let me know if you're seeing that now.
We are, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Let me try and drag this out of the way too. Okay, cool. So this is docket VAR 20-3, the harms variance request, located at 1126 James Canyon Drive. So just a quick overview of the project. The applicant and owner is Eric Harms. It's in the forestry zoning district. The parcel size is roughly 3/4 of an acre. It is a building lot, and the request is for a 1-foot side setback where the required setback is 25 feet This is to allow for a 598 square foot detached garage on this 0.75 acre parcel. So just a quick look at the maps. Here's the vicinity up James Canyon Drive, about halfway up to Jamestown from Left-Hand Canyon. Here's a closer look at the property. One quick note, the properties that Mr. Harms owns, he actually owns this small piece as well as this larger kind of snaking piece here. These underwent a subdivision exemption process recently, so the lot is actually a slightly different shape than is shown here, but generally it is the smaller lot in this location surrounded by this larger lot. And we'll look at a closer map of that in a few minutes. Just in terms of the comprehensive plan, you can see there are quite a few different designations going on, environmental conservation areas, archaeologically sensitive areas, as well as a high scenic quality rating on James Canyon Drive. That'll come into play as we talk about the design of the garage. In terms of public lands, you can see Mr. Harms' properties are pretty much surrounded by U.S. Forest Service land with a few other mining claims in the vicinity. And then in terms of geologic hazards, it's hard to tell, but you can see there are some small areas of geologic hazard on the property. Where he'll be doing the work is going to be subterranean, and I don't think will be significantly impacted by these geohazards. And a quick aerial view of the property. Again, the property lines are different now. What you can see is the main residence here. You can see James Canyon Drive down at the bottom of the photo. And then this, what looks like his driveway, is actually a Forest Service road, 287.1. And that does act essentially as his driveway, but continues on to some other private parcels, as well as access to Forest Service land. And you can see he parks off of that road at present. The location for the proposed garage is going to be kind of in this area where you can see the propane tank. And again, we'll look at that in more detail in a moment. So here's an updated map showing the property after the subdivision exemption. This was just approved within the last couple of months. The deeds were just filed just ahead of this meeting, a few weeks back. So this now is the property lines for the property, and you can see the existing conditions here. Again, the residence, the Forest Service road. You can see the parking area that currently exists with a propane tank. One thing to note specifically about this property is it is encumbered by two different roads that cross through it. So we have James Canyon Drive and its right-of-way, which is actually relatively large, as well as the Forest Service parcel or road that runs through the parcel. In addition to this, most of the rest of the property is steeply sloped and or ledge. So we'll be talking about that as we go through the variance criteria, but just wanted to point that out. This is already a small parcel with a lot of things going on it already. So here's the site plan submitted by the applicant. This is generally what he would like to do, is to put this new garage in close to the Forest Service road, just outside of the right-of-way for that. And that only leaves just a 1 foot gap between the property line with the U.S. Forest Service and the new garage. Well, we'll get to the history of the garage in a moment. So here's basically the same site plan with the aerial photo, and also just noting some of the other encumbrances on the property. This was provided by the applicant. So you can see any of the other open areas either are encumbered by the septic tanks and leach field, or there's rock outcrops and steep slope, the canyon wall, etc., all throughout. Really, this is the only area of the property that seems suitable for additional structures. So the applicant did submit two different concepts, essentially the same plan, just with the garage rotated. Because the variance request is the same, it's 1 foot on either concept. Staff didn't take a position on this. That would come through during the review of the actual structure. And the applicant wants to keep these two options, both of them open, just in case when they're doing the excavation, if they run into large bedrock or something that would need to be blasted, they want to have the flexibility to be able to maybe shift the garage to accommodate that. Here's just some renderings provided by the applicant. You can see both designs are sunk into the slope. That was in response to comments during the subdivision exemption. from our natural resources planner, who noted the visual quality score for James Canyon Drive and issued some concerns about the visual impacts of the garage being so close to the road and at this intersection where things are kind of already open. So in response to that, the applicant, I think initially had been thinking about putting the garage up at grade, up kind of in the same level as their house, and then modified their design to move the structure below grade, and plans to face the structure with natural materials such as stone to help it blend in a little further. And just some quick photos from the site visit. This photo on the left shows the area where the garage would go. Again, here's that septic tank we were looking at. So depending on the orientation, the garage would go generally in this location here. And then here's from up on top, you can see the septic tank, and this would be the area again where the garage would go. You can see this is one of the staff cars parked. This is the National Forest Service road that runs through the property, and this is the parking area they're using currently. So in terms of referrals, we heard from our Building Safety and Inspection Services team. They just said permits, plan review, et cetera, are required as usual. Engineering review noted that the intersection of the Forest Service Road and James Canyon Drive should not be modified during the construction of this. One of the renderings shows a wide driveway apron, and they wanted to make sure that that did not occur. And they also want the parking area near the residence to be decommissioned and revegetated once the new garage is in place. They also noted that permission will be required from the Forest Service to essentially put a new access onto that road. Our natural resources planner had no particular concerns with this variance request. The wildfire mitigation team noted a few comments or a few concerns. They noted that the mitigation, wildfire mitigation on the property would require either moving the garage or getting a variance from the National Forest Service in terms of being able to do some clearing on the land to accommodate the buffer around the building of non-combustible materials. We'll talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. They provided 3 options that I think the applicant will be able to meet. Again, they noted that defensible space and ignition resistant materials will be required. Our historic review team had no concerns with this. Public health had no concerns. And we did hear from one neighboring property owner, and they were supportive of the project. And I think I lost the slide somewhere between our earlier review and this, but there is a little bit of history on this parcel. This garage is basically allowed through a hazard mitigation docket from flood damage from the 2013 floods. There was some buildings lost on the larger parcel, and through that HMR process, Mr. Harms is basically given the right to do a 598 square foot accessory building on this new parcel. And so that's where this garage comes in. The county has essentially granted him this right to do this structure, and he's trying to find a place basically to put it on this very constrained parcel. The subdivision exemption was done to help accommodate that, but the boundaries of the Forest Service land around really still, necessitated a variance request with basically the property being so restricted. So in terms of the variance criteria, criteria A, there exist exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstances of the subject property, such as irregularity, narrowness, shallowness, or slope. Just noted that the property is small, it's irregularly shaped. It's also crossed by James Canyon Drive and the Forest Service Road, and is also heavily encumbered with steep slopes and rock outcrops. So we found that all of these did create an exceptional circumstance for the property. Criteria B, because of these physical circumstances, a strict application of the code creates an exceptional or undue hardship upon the property owner. Again, the property owner has been granted that right to construct 598 square feet of accessory structure through that HMR 13-32. The physical circumstances of the property would require either a variance such as this or significant earthwork, likely blasting, to accommodate the garage in a different location. Staff doesn't find that that's the best option. And then given the HMR status and these physical circumstances, we do find that the setbacks constitute an undue hardship on this property. Criteria C, the hardship is not self-imposed. Again, the HMR docket does provide the right to construct this accessory structure on his property, and the physical circumstances of the lot and the required setbacks are creating the hardship. Nothing that Mr. Harms has done has created this hardship. Criteria D, the variance will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property permitted under this code. The garage as designed will not interfere with passage across this Forest Service road. We've included a condition to verify that, a condition of approval. There may be some visual impacts from this, but they'll be minimized by the below grade construction and the use of natural materials on the face of the building. So we find that's been properly mitigated. And again, we've had no objections from any adjacent property owners or really any concerns from referral agencies. All the neighbors are located far away from this parcel, so I don't think this will have any bearing on any adjacent properties. Criteria E, the variance will not change the character of the zoning district in which the property is located and is in keeping with the intent of the code and the comprehensive plan. Garages such as this and accessory structures are common and expected throughout the forestry district, really not an unusual circumstance. The proposed structure is sized and located similarly to how you would find accessory structures throughout the forestry district. As long as the variance is supported, we don't find any conflicts with the comprehensive plan or code as conditioned with wildfire mitigation, visual impact mitigation, things like that. So we find it's consistent with this criteria as well. And the variance, if granted, does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the county and is in accordance with the comprehensive plan and intergovernmental agreements. Again, emergency access to properties on James Canyon Drive and Forest Service Road will not be compromised by this new garage. And there are these concerns from the wildfire mitigation staff about non-combustible materials at least 3 feet from the building. These can be mitigated. They provide 3 different mitigation strategies. And those are included as conditions of approval. And the applicant should be able to meet these with their subterranean construction. So our recommendation, land use staff recommends that the board conditionally approves this variance with the following conditions. Building permits will be required. They'll need to provide documentation of permission from the U.S. Forest Service to access their road. The access will be to the Forest Service Road only. The intersection with James Canyon Drive and the Forest Service Road should not be modified. The Forest Service Road cannot be obstructed during construction. And then standard wildfire mitigation and defensible space requirements. And either of these 3 options, these were what was provided from wildfire mitigation staff. To either move the garage so the walls are 3 feet from the property line and drip line is 2 feet from the property line. That will allow for non-combustible surface around the structure. Construct the structure so that walls and the roof are completely subterranean. That appears to be possible with this. Or, if neither of those 2 are possible, obtain permission from the U.S. Forest Service to install a non-combustible service on their land across the property line. And then finally, as usual, the terms, conditions, and commitment of record for the docket. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gamble. Does anyone on the board have any questions?
This is Scott Rudge. I have just a couple of questions, if I may. Mr. Gamble, just a point of clarification. You referred to a tank on the west side of the property near where the garage is going to be. Once is a propane tank and twice is a septic tank. The drawing showed don't show a tank there at all, but the septic tank being on the east side of the property, closer to the leach field. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm sorry, I may have misspoken. The propane tank is over where the new garage will be located. The septic tank is located up near the residence to the east of the residence, and the leach field is just down below that.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Okay, thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification.
Thanks for
And then,
yeah.
and then my second question is one of earthwork and blasting. I'm understanding from the way this has been phrased that there are actually other viable locations for a garage that would not require a variance, but would require significant earthwork and blasting. But to make this garage subterranean, it seems to me will also require earthwork and possibly blasting. Is there, can you give us some idea? A, is the hypothesis true? Are there viable non-setback required locations, even though they would have these requirements for earthwork? So is the hypothesis true? And then if that hypothesis is true, are we talking about just a matter of extent rather than a matter of required versus not required?
Yeah, so if we look back at the slide that's up, this area that says rock outcrop and steep slope, this is another area we looked at a little bit when we were out on the site visit. It's possible they might not be able to fit a structure of the same size exactly, or maybe, but this really was basically a lot of like rock face, exposed bedrock in this area. The amount of earthwork, like I said, blasting, et cetera, that would be required in this location would be pretty significant, I think, and it's certainly something that I don't think staff would want to see happen. This area, the applicant did do some test digging. It seemed like there was not. There would be some earthwork, but nothing like that would be required here, where they would be, essentially blasting and removing the rock face. This area is kind of in a little bit of a gully, so it does appear like it's less likely that this will be superficial bedrock, things like that. So until they get in there, I don't think they're going to know exactly what's under, say, the back corner. There may be some work like that required, but certainly from a standpoint, I would say it is a matter of extent, but I would say that extent varies greatly between, a considerable amount of work over on the east side of the property versus, I think, a considerably lesser amount on the west side.
Wouldn't that structure on the east side of the property also require a variance?
If it were the extent shown of this red box, it would. There might be a possibility that somehow something could be squeezed into the setback. The setback is this green line here.
Right.
So they might be able to fit something in here.
Isn't there a right of way to the forest road as well?
There is, and
there
that's shown by this.
Center?
That's shown by this dashed line here. So they would really need to squeeze something in, kind of right in here. Again, I just, it really was kind of a rock face out there. I would have a hard time recommending that as a planner.
Okay, and then this question goes beyond this particular docket, but I wanted to follow up with Larry. We did write a letter to City Council about our ability to make accommodations for things like environmental considerations, so forth, on our own discretion. As far as I know, that letter was never answered.
That's correct. Although I believe we did have Dale Case, I believe, did say at one of our recent hearings that the board had instructed land use or community planning to work on a response to that and to create what might be a reasonable proposal in response to the Board of Adjustment's concerns. So I believe that work is currently ongoing.
And I can offer some more information on that. This is Kim Sanchez, Deputy Director of Planning. We did present it to the Board of County Commissioners, and they were in support of there being limited circumstances in which the BOA could, make decisions, giving you some flexibility. So it's on staff's work plan. We have a number of other land use code text amendments that are ahead of it, but it's in our work plan. So we do plan to get to it at some point.
Okay, this is Scott Roach again. Thanks. I don't have any more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Do any of the other board members have questions? I think I saw Sarah raise her hand.
Hi, yeah, I had a couple questions. One is building off of what Scott was asking about. But first, I just wanted to ask staff kind of a clarifying question. The staff recommendation is using the HMR as part of the rationale for the recommendation. And I'm curious why it's relevant, if it's on a different property, or after the subdivision, does it now apply to this property as well?
So I'm not super familiar with the HMR. I've done the research that is there based in the documentation. From what I understand, part of the intent of the HMR was to allow this building to be built on this parcel with the residents, because it had been located across the road on the lower part of the parcel, on the neighboring parcel, which had been washed out in the flood. So part of the HMR arrangement was to allow for a structure on the on the property with the residents, and part of the subdivision exemption, the intent of that was to essentially enlarge that parcel in a way that was sensible, that would allow for something like this garage to be built.
Okay, so without the HMR, would the property otherwise be allowed to build an additional structure?
I haven't looked at the floor area, for instance. The presumptive size max for the area. I suspect so, though the residence that's there is not particularly large, so I don't think they would be coming up to the 2,500 square foot minimum through the county. So, yeah, I don't think, I can't say for sure without looking, but I suspect it would be allowed in concept.
Okay, I think it was a little confusing that it's talked about as applying to the other property, but it's part of why it would be allowing a structure on this property. So I guess if additional clarity is possible, that would be helpful. I don't know if the applicant can speak to that. But the second question was similar to what Scott had asked about, and this is for the applicant. Is he online? I know he said he may have some trouble joining us.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Is it better to ask after your presentation, or save my question, or ask it now?
Yeah,
So Sarah, typically
we haven't opened it to the public or to the applicant yet, so.
Okay, so I'll wait then.
Yeah, so typically the way we will do things is we'll have staff make their presentation. We'll ask any questions of staff. Then once everyone's had a chance to ask questions from staff, we'll let the applicant make any presentation they want to make, and we can ask questions of them. I don't think that the applicant is planning to speak today, but I understand that he is available for questions. So if there are no other questions for Mr. Gambrill, we will move on to the applicant and see if we can get him online here to ask some questions. Any other questions for Mr. Gambrill? Going once, going twice? Okay. So we'll now open the floor to Mr. Harms. Mr. Harms, do you want to make any statement today?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I apologize again if my internet connection drops. I do not have a presentation, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Sean did an excellent job at explaining everything, and he's been great at ushering us through this process.
Excellent. Board questions for Mr. Harms?
I have
one. I'll go after Sarah.
Okay.
She raised her hand.
I'm just wondering if you could speak to my earlier question about whether you would have been allowed to build a garage on your property without the HRM, and how the HRM that is shown to be for the other part of your property can apply to this part of the property.
Certainly, I'll do my best. So Our house is roughly 1,500 square feet. So I do believe that Sean is correct in that a garage would be allowed on a parcel of our size and vicinity. As far as the HMR concern goes, I understand that it is a rather confusing case. If it is of any assistance, I can say that the build site was formerly on 1029 James Canyon Drive, the larger parcel that suffered the loss in the flood, and it is since completing the subdivision exemption that the smaller parcel now encompasses that build site. So the HMR applies to the piece of land, but a different parcel now, if that makes any sense at all.
No, that's great. That's helpful. Thank you. And two other questions. The first was similar to the earlier question about blasting. So was your staff had referenced that you had an original concept for the garage that was changed because of the requests from staff as far as fire safety. Was your original proposal for an above grade garage that would not have required any blasting?
No, I hate to contradict Sean on this point. There was probably a crossed wire there. Our original proposal was to sink this garage into the grade, which simply makes access easier. And we also resonate very strongly with the desire to maintain the visual appeal and value of James Canyon Drive. And we feel that sinking this building into the grade will mitigate any concerns on that front, in addition to with our ability or our desire to face any exposed area with natural material. So yes, it has always been our plan to sink the garage in that case. And we have done a test dig at the build site, and to our relief, we did find sediment and some loose stones, but no bedrock. That's not to guarantee that we won't find bedrock, as Sean mentioned, but it certainly does appear to be promising at this point, which is certainly not the case on any other build site that we've considered where the rock is exposed and very substantial and significant.
Okay. And did you do, from my perspective, looking at the design and where it's located, it looks, if you just rotated it 15 degrees, that it would fit within the setback. Was that something that was tried and it just didn't work because of grade changes or other reasons?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Can you elaborate what you mean by rotate?
Yeah, I'm looking at what's up on the screen right now. Can you go back actually to what was just there, the survey showing all the, yeah. So you show the new garage in purple, and it looks like if you just rotated it counterclockwise so that the orientation is more like the current parking access where you're coming off the road and the car is facing towards the house at a 45-degree angle, that the garage would not need to go over that green setback line. But I'm wondering if there are circumstances on the site that we can't see in plan that made that not feasible.
I believe I understand your question. Let me know if I'm getting it wrong, though. So the variance in this case is for the ability to construct within the area indicated between the green and red line. We are not allowed to build within 25 feet of that red line without a variance. So I don't believe there's any way that we could rotate or reposition this garage at this site without falling within that setback.
I see, so it's not that corner.
Correct. And I believe that this might be a good opportunity for me to pass off my answer to Sean, who knows the rules a lot better than me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, if we look back at the screen, this green line is the setback line. And then you can see the dashed line here is the Forest Service right of way. And that's an area of probably 5 or 6 feet. So you're not going to be able to fit anything in that area. That would really be the only buildable spot in that location.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of my questions.
And actually, Sarah, if I could add on to providing some information about the hazard mitigation review. Hazard mitigation review was it's a section of our Article 19 regulations, which are related to emergencies and disasters in the county. So really what the hazard mitigation process allows for is a substitute for site plan review for a property owner to rebuild a structure that was damaged or destroyed from an event outside of, their control. So he had a structure that was damaged or destroyed from the 2013 flood. The hazard mitigation review allows him to rebuild that. It does get a little bit confusing and convoluted because of the subdivision exemption and the boundary line adjustment, but it's not allowing him to rebuild something that he wasn't otherwise able to do. So he's just rebuilding what he lost and up to the amount that doesn't trigger review otherwise.
Yeah,
If
great.
that's
Thank
helpful.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Harms?
Yes, Eric, this is Scott Rudge. And my question relates to Mr. Harms, but I have a feeling that staff is going to answer it. I was not aware that an applicant had to present a rejected building permit application in order to be referred to the Board of Adjustment. I was surprised to read that in the applicant's package. Is that a requirement in every case that in order to seek a variance, you have to have a building permit that's rejected for lack of a variance?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's the trigger for a variance. Yeah.
Okay,
So
thanks.
the
I don't
reasoning
recall
is
seeing
where-
that in previous packets. I can understand the reasoning. I just don't remember seeing that
Yeah,
in every single packet that we've
covered
gotten.
in some of our
So,
trainings before, but it's essentially that we are approving a site-specific plan when we're looking at a variance request. And so that is initiated through the building permit review.
okay, good to know. I didn't realize that previously and don't remember seeing them in other applicants' packages. So that doesn't mean that they didn't exist or didn't happen. I just don't recall them being submitted. So thank you for that clarification. I don't have any other questions.
Any other questions for Mr. Harms? Typically, we would now turn back to staff and give the staff another opportunity to respond to anything that Mr. Harms had said. I don't expect, however, the staff's going to have anything that they want to add. Mr. Gamble, do you want to make any kind of rebuttal to the responses that Mr. Harms gave to the questions that were asked to him?
No, I have nothing further.
Wonderful. We will then close the public portion, we will close the applicant section of the hearing, and we'll now open the hearing to public comment. According to the list that I have, no one has signed up to offer any public comments, and I don't see anything here that indicates we're going to have anybody that intends to make a statement. Is there anybody on the call or on the Teams meeting that wants to, any member of the public that wants to comment? All right. Seeing no public comments, I will close the public hearing, and now I will open the floor for board discussion of this variance. Since everyone seems to be quiet, I'll go ahead and say it. It sounds to me like this is a reasonable request by the applicant, and I would be inclined to grant the variance with the staff conditions.
I'm likewise favorably inclined that the applicant has met all of the criteria from Article 4, especially the no adverse impact portion on subsection 4 to adjacent properties or the character of the zoning district. So I'm likewise going to be in favor of this application.
This is Scott Rudge. I'm also inclined to approve this application. However, according to the strict criteria, I don't really believe that we've met condition A unless we use our discretion to approve the site that requires less blasting and earthwork than the alternate site. We've used that discretion in the past, and I'm in favor of continuing to use that discretion until City Council tells us otherwise. But I do think that it's important to acknowledge that we've asked for that discretion, and we have not formally been granted that discretion.
I'll move that docket. Sorry, was there any other discussion?
Go ahead, Carrie.
Okay. I'll move that docket variance 20-003, the harm setback variance, is conditionally approved with the following conditions. 1, the applicant shall obtain all applicable building and grading permits for the new garage. 2, documentation of permission to access Forest Service Road 287.1 shall be provided at the time of the building permit application for the garage. 3, access to the proposed garage shall be via Forest Service Road 287.1 only in the intersection of Forest Service Road and James Canyon Drive shall not be modified. 4, Forest Service Road 287.1 shall not be obstructed during construction. 5, wildfire mitigation is required, including defensible space and construction with ignition-resistant materials. The applicant shall further mitigate wildfire risk via one of the following options. A, to relocate the structure so that walls are at least 3 feet from the property line and drip lines are at least 2 feet from the property line, or construct the structure in a way that any portion of the walls or roof within 3 feet of the property line are completely subterranean, or obtain permission from the U.S. Forest Service to install the required non-combustible surface on their land. 6, the applicant shall be subject to the terms and conditions and commitments of record.
I'd like to second the motion. This is Scott Rudge.
There's been a motion to approve VAR-20-003. Motion has been seconded. All in favor?
James Greer.
Yeah, we have to do it by roll call.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have to do roll call votes. So James Greer.
Aye.
Eric Mouts, aye. Scott Rudge.
Scott Rudge, aye.
Carrie Stolpus.
Aye.
Sarah Weavenson. Sarah, I believe that you are muted. I see you speaking, but yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm going to abstain just because I appreciate all the information from staff and the applicant, but I'm unfortunately not convinced about criterion number 2, but I'm not strongly in opposition. So.
Okay. With a vote of 4 votes in favor and 1 abstention, the motion passes. VAR-20-003 is approved. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks all.
Yeah.